This gardener's just been telling me all about edible herbs.
Well, that's very good of him.
Yeah, he's been giving me sage advice. We've been working hard and now we're about ready to start seeing it pay off. The Seven of Pentacles is a card of putting our heart and soul into something and then taking a step back to see how we're getting on and what we've achieved so far. Arthur Edward Waite says a young man leaning on his staff looks intently at 7 pentacles attached to a clump of greenery on his right. One would say that these are his treasures and that his heart was there. So we're talking about meaningful work here, and that's very much the theme of the next 3 cards in this suit. I talked last time about how we sometimes get a little 3-card vignette in the tarot. We saw it in the 4, 5 and 6 of Pentacles, where we had a miser followed by an image of poverty and finally a card of prosperity and sharing. Another little 3-card story that I've found is in the 9, 10 and Queen of Swords, where we see despair, desolation and finally acceptance. Here we find ourselves involved in the theme of work, and in this case that's meaningful work. We're not just talking about paying the bills here, this is the kind of stuff that gets us excited and we really take pride in. Like Waite says, his heart is there. Now that could be anything at all. What's meaningful to one person might seem empty and futile to someone else, so it all comes down to how we judge what's important and worthwhile to us. We've got our figure gazing happily at his garden. He's planted the seeds, nurtured the plants, and now he's starting to see the fruits of his labour. But he still needs to be patient to see the final result. This works with anything that we've devoted ourselves to. There's a special kind of satisfaction that comes from seeing hard work finally start to pay off. It also gives us a chance to stand back and assess where we've got to on a project. If we're really putting ourselves into something, a big part of that is constant evaluation. When we start to see results, we can get a good idea of where we're heading. Positive feedback lets us know we're on the right track and doing things properly. Finally, we've got this idea of how meaningful work can impact our well-being. When we're living with a sense of purpose, that spills over into all other aspects of our lives, including our relationships and spiritual growth. Rachel Pollack says, from the image of work we move towards its reward. Like the 9, the 7 shows the pentacles as a living development from the person's labour. Meaningful work gives more than material benefit. The person too grows.
Look, Pink Floyd are helping to look after Led Zeppelin's garden. Oh yes, how splendid. I see they've all got their own jobs.
Yeah, Roger Waters, Robert's plant. The Thoth card has thrown me a massive curveball this week. Dark leaves seem to be the order of the day, although I thought they were feathers at first.
They're called bird leaves.
Crowley says the atmosphere of the card is that of blight. In the background, which represents vegetation and cultivation, everything is spoiled. So pretty much the opposite of everything that I've been talking about so far. I'll get to how this came about when I talk about the Hermetic title, but Crowley and Harris definitely went in a different direction here. If we look very closely at the discs, we can see the bull of Taurus on some, and others have what look like the symbol of Saturn adapted into the side profile of a head. I'm assuming this belongs to the Roman god Saturn. Crowley goes on to say the 4 colours of Netzach appear, but they are blotched with angry indigo and reddish orange. The discs themselves are the leaden discs of Saturn. They suggest bad money.
Oh, we don't want any of that bad money.
Well, hang on, we don't know how much it is yet. Lon Milo Duquette tried to find some reassurance with this one, but sadly came up empty-handed. He says the card presents an image of cold, stark beauty. That, I'm afraid, is the best that can be said about it. Try as I may, I can't find one kind word from Crowley concerning failure.
The Sforza Marseille cards continue their journey through the suit by making them even more flowery and coiny. The Solabusca card offers us an image of a drummer guarding his cymbals. He also appears to have taken up nude falconry. Everybody needs a hobby. This life is not purely animal,
Isn't it?
It is, according to the spirit of this card, the lavishness expressed by the 7 of coins.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Whatever it is.
The Hermetic title for the 7 of Pentacles is Lord of Success Unfulfilled.
I can't tell you how much fun it is when the Waite-Smith card completely contradicts the Hermetic title. Try as I might to find some common ground between these two ideas, I'm afraid to say there isn't any. The title of the Thoth card is simply failure, so we can see that Crowley was a lot more on board with the Golden Dawn's esoteric formula for the tarot. I think we can look at this as two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, we've got hard work starting to pay off, and on the other we see a situation where it just hasn't worked out. Eden Gray goes with this more negative description. She talks about disappointment and success is not attained. The contradiction here could come from Waite's reluctance to fully share the secrets of the Golden Dawn, or it could come from Pamela Coleman Smith's own interpretation of the card. I guess we'll never know, but in both cases I think we've still got the idea of hard work. We're just seeing two completely different results from that. However, despite the two cards seeming to have completely contradictory meanings, there is another way of looking at it. We know that the title of the Thoth card is failure, but isn't failure just another step on the road to success? Bear with me here, but there's a famous story about Thomas Edison when he was inventing the light bulb. Apparently he tried 1,000 different methods and none of them worked, but he didn't let that put him off. When he was asked by a reporter how it felt to fail 1,000 times, he replied, "I didn't fail, I succeeded in finding 1,000 ways that don't work." I'm paraphrasing there, that might not be the exact quote, but you get the idea. We're talking about taking a step back and seeing the big picture. If something has ended in failure, then at the very least we know that that way doesn't work, and we can try again with our newfound wisdom. Thomas Edison totally understood this idea, and thanks to that we can now walk down the street at night without bumping into each other. He said, "When you have exhausted all possibilities, remember this, you haven't."
The Seven of Pentacles corresponds to the Taurus zodiac sign and to the planet Saturn.
Now we're starting to shed a little bit of light on the Hermetic title we were just talking about. We've still got our lovable and dependable bull, but now he's straining under the weight of Saturn. However, I think this combination works equally well in either definition of the Seven of Pentacles. Taurus is an earth sign known for its practicality and persistence, so the work ethic is there for all to see. Saturn is the planet of discipline, structure and time, so that's where the patience aspect comes into play. When we put the two together, we get a cosmic energy that reinforces the message of working hard and seeing slow and steady growth that we find in this card. Seven of Pentacles notable people include British revolutionary nurse Florence Nightingale, first woman in the US to receive a pilot's license Harriet Quimby, and Spanish surrealist artist Salvador Dali. Spanish surrealist artist Salvador Dali. Yes!
The Seven of Pentacles resides in the world of Asiyah and sits at the seventh Sephira of Netzach on the Pillar of Mercy.
So we're all the way down at the bottom of the Pillar of Mercy and at the Sephira of Victory. Now victory is only one of the titles for this Sephira, others include eternity and endurance. This last one is of particular note when it comes to the Seven of Pentacles because endurance is exactly what we need when we're working hard toward a goal. Remember the Thomas Edison example, he had more endurance than a porn star. This is also the sphere of passion and creative energy, so it plays a big part in bringing our dreams and desires into manifestation. Now in order to make that happen we need drive and motivation, so that's where the endurance part comes into play. When we put all that together, we hopefully get the result of victory, and that's exactly where we want to be. More victory, please! In the Kabbalah Unveiled, Samuel McGregor Mathers writes, the seventh Sephira is Netzach, or firmness and victory, corresponding to the divine names Jehovah Sabaoth, the Lord of armies, and the angelic names Elohim, gods, and Tharashisim. Anyway, it means the brilliant ones.
The Seven of Pentacles herb is rhubarb. The roots of this herb can be used to aid digestion and to promote bowel movements.
Well done, Corporal. We're promoting you to Sergeant.
Yippee!
But what does it all mean?
The Seven of Pentacles is a card of hard work starting to pay off. We've been toiling away on something that we're passionate about, and now it's starting to bear fruit. Now when it comes to A.E.WAITE divinations, he writes, these are exceedingly contradictory. In the main it is a card of money, business, barter. But one reading gives altercation, quarrels, and another innocence, ingenuity, purgation. As you can probably tell, I've had some real fun and games trying to make sense of this one. The Two of Swords is another classic example. I've talked about this before, but Waite divinations in the key to the tarot range from the blindingly obvious to the buttock-clenchingly obscure, and this card falls into the latter camp. What we've got here is someone who's not over-enthusiastic about divination, trying to tie the Golden Dawn formula in with the historical descriptions, and at the same time trying to throw us off the scent by keeping some of it secret. There are certain cards where that becomes really apparent, and in this case he may as well be talking about Victorian plumbing for all the good he's done. Anyway, never mind all that. I'm here to talk about the card in its practical application, not spew seemingly random and unconnected words at you. We get enough of that nonsense from A.E.WAITE. Pixie knew what was going on with the Seven of Pentacles, and she gifted us with the quintessential image of the ongoing reward of meaningful work. Now that works in all kinds of different contexts. On the surface we've got the feeling of accomplishment that we've been talking about so far. Another way of looking at it is purely financial, so that could be the feeling we get when we've been saving our money and we're watching it slowly accumulate. I, for one, would like to find out what that feels like one day. Investing obviously fits into this category too, so if you're a trader, then this would be the time when you start to see some returns. There's also our day-to-day work. We've talked about these lofty ideas of inventing light bulbs and changing the world, but it doesn't have to be anything like that. If you've got a job that you find rewarding, and that can literally be anything, then this card fits perfectly. On the more negative side, we've got the subject of being a workaholic. There's a fine line between driven to work hard on something we're passionate about and just working compulsively for its own sake. A workaholic is someone who can't limit the time they spend working, even if it's impacting their health or relationships, so that's something to keep in mind. While we're on the subject of relationships, this is another part of our lives that takes work and nurturing, so this card can represent a time when our bond with someone has deepened, and we feel like we're moving on to the next level. Of course, there's always the spiritual aspect to this. If we're walking the path to transcendence, then this card can indicate that we're making progress. That fits with the psychological aspect too. If we've been having some therapy or working with our mental well-being, then this can be the time when we start to feel the benefits of that. Let's not forget the physical aspect. Maybe you've been pumping iron at the local gym and you're finally starting to see some gains. If that's you, then please let me know what that feels like in the comments, and maybe it'll inspire me to finally get back in the gym myself. However, I think the overarching theme of this card is that we've worked so hard on something that we're now at the stage where we can stand back and slowly reap the rewards. Rachel Pollack says the card implies whatever has been built up, including relationships between people, has reached a point where it can grow by itself, and the person can step back from it without it collapsing.
It warns you that you will be financially victimized by someone who is abusing your trust. We got an email from a gorgeous Russian girl called Katerina. She's very keen to talk to you.
Just send me the virus link. When the Seven of Pentacles appears reversed, it can mean that we're not seeing a return on our hard work. Waite says reversed, cause for anxiety regarding money which it may be proposed to lend. Does anyone agree on what this card means? Waite doesn't even seem to agree with himself. Anyway, as I was saying, if the upright definition is about hard work starting to pay off, then the upside down card can mean that we're anxious that that won't happen. A lack of patience and persistence could be at play here. We want to see the results long before we've put in the necessary work to make that happen. It can also mean that we're not getting any sense of accomplishment from what we're doing, and the work just isn't meaningful to us. Rachel Pollack says the 7 reversed shows the pervasive dissatisfaction, the trap feeling that comes from unsatisfying jobs or commitments.
If this tarot is in the reverse, it urges you not to worry about money.
You heard him. We can all go out in the town and rip it up tonight. The big takeaway from the 7 of Pentacles is the concept of being dedicated to something that we're passionate about and getting to a point where we're starting to see results from that dedication. Now, in order for that to happen, we have to have patience and faith in ourselves. John Burroughs once said, "For anything worth having, one must pay the price. And the price is always work, patience, love, self-sacrifice. No paper currency, no promises to pay, but the gold of real service."
I must say his garden looks a lot better than Kippy's. I think David Attenborough's hiding in there somewhere making a documentary. May the coming days bring you gratification and pride. Until next time.